Hi everybody, Julie Stern, and this is the fourth and final video of our book club where we looked at chapters 7 and 8. So chapter 7 is all about assessment, chapter 8 is all about instruction. These are two super valuable chapters, and so I want to go briefly through what we shared in our book club. So our overarching question for our hour together with everyone was, what's the relationship between purposeful instructional design and meaningful assessment? So that just to sort of frame our time together. And then here's the quote that starts off chapter 7, and Trevor's our quote finder and he just talked a little bit about why he chose this quote from Booker T. Washington. And so even though it is a historical quote, it was said a really long time ago, it has such relevance today about looking at quality over quantity. So rather than thinking about how much we're going to cover as teachers or how many problems students are going to solve, it's really about what's the quality of work. And I love this last line. One problem thoroughly understood is of more value than a score poorly mastered. And so often in our assessments, maybe students are almost like looking for the grade rather than looking for the learning, looking for the understanding. And so that's what we try to really lay out in our assessments chapter. And so this is a quote from page 185. If there was one single shift that had the power to transform a classroom, this would be it. Assess for transfer. And I just love that quote. I didn't write it. It was written by a co-author, Krista Ferraro. I just think it's so true and so powerful to transform a classroom, to assess for transfer. So for us, assessments are a system of feedback about the quality of teaching and learning. They are a way to communicate to us, to students, to parents, to the larger community, how well is learning taking place and teaching taking place. We have a quote in there from John Hattie who says, assessment is feedback about me as the teacher. It tells me how well I'm doing when I watch what my students are doing on assessments. So love that. We talk about students and teacher taking an active role in assessing students' ability to transfer their understanding to new situations. So Krista uses this quote a lot as we are designing our assessments course. We have a whole course on chapter 7, basically, a 6-week course, all just really diving deep into assessments. And so sort of the motto that Krista keeps saying in our calls as we design this course is teacher designed. Assessments are teacher designed but student driven. And love the idea of we design the assessment, but students drive the assessments. And so what does it mean to drive something, to be in control of something, to direct something? Absolutely love. So that's really pages 188 to 194, where we talk a lot about both of these key points. And page 189, we share a couple different things, a rubric as well as just a bulleted list of success criteria for acquire, connect, and transfer. And this to me seems to be the number one way to really transform our classroom. If students know that their ability to articulate a concept in their own words, the meaning of a concept in their own words, and generate examples and non-examples themselves, we know that they have acquired understanding of that concept. If they can explain complex relationships among several concepts, we know that they've got a deep understanding, they've grasped the structure, they're building a schema of concepts in their brains. We know that then they can use that to transfer their learning to new situations. So that's something that lots of people were putting into chat, that they absolutely loved the rubric and the success criteria for transfer. And so we briefly talked about this design step of how to sort of design a summative task. And this is roughly how we like to sit down and plan it out, is what's the engaging novel scenario? What's the new situation that requires students to apply their understanding into this new situation. And then this sort of counterpart of how will students impact the world, getting to that real world transfer. And I love this last question here. How will students observe their impact? I'm pretty sure that was Krista who wrote that. How will students observe their impact? And since she wrote it, I've really been trying to think about this consciously in my own practice. And it really does push us to give that next boost to our real world transfer when we ask ourselves, how will my students observe their impact in the world? And then finally, the reflection piece. So useful to get teachers to really think, where am I going to provide this opportunity for students to reflect on the choices that they made? So often we use these beautiful project-based or performance task types of assessments, and they're often missing this metacognitive piece where students are reflecting on the choices that they made, the reasons why they did things, the growth in their learning. This is why we love student-led conferencing, student-led portfolios, where they're explaining how their thinking has evolved. Often a missing piece in really great assessments. So I love that that's there. So just to sort of wrap up for us, assessing for transfer means it has to go beyond recall. It has to go beyond sort of discrete skill application. Students have to abstract out and apply their understanding to new, novel situations. And formative and summative assessments are aligned and prompt students to transfer. We do not make the mistake that I made, gosh, wow, it was like probably in 2008, 2009 when I first started playing with transfer. I waited until the very end of the unit, and students just weren't prepared. So you want to do sort of transfer, and in a unit, you want to think about multiple opportunities to transfer. You don't save it for the end of the unit to create this culture of transfer. So we align ourselves to backwards design, and how sort of we have this visual here, how we kind of align ourselves with understanding by design. We work with a lot of schools who use understanding by design. So just to go through the three stages: students identify, teachers identify desired results, determine acceptable evidence of those, and then of course plan our learning experiences that are going to lead students towards these desired results and showing us the acceptable evidence. Very similar for us, sort of somewhat of a play on it, is our desired results are always, for every unit, students' ability to transfer their learning to completely novel situations. That's our desired results. And so then we think about a specific real world situation where we're going to have students transfer their learning. And once we do that, that's kind of the stage 2, the assessment piece. Once we do that, we can plan a path of transfer to increasingly complex contexts. So this is a big overview visual of what's on page 214. When we sit down and we plan our summative assessment, then we plan a path of learning experiences that are going to get success on this summative assessment. So what we did was just a quick reflection. We asked people to use this visible thinking routine from Ron Richard, but we absolutely love. At first I thought blank about assessment, but now I think blank. And in chat, wow, it was just blowing up with incredible things people were sharing about how at first they thought it was, assessing what we covered. But now I think it's assessing transfer to a totally new situation. That was one common thread that people shared in chat, which we loved seeing as a sort of reflection in how their thinking has grown. And we did some little breakout rooms where people shared more thinking about that. So chapter 8, all about instructional design. It could be a mini book in and of itself. It's mostly primarily written by Kayla Duncan, and we just said, wow, Kayla, teachers are going to live in chapter 8. And so if you haven't checked out chapter 8 yet, just skip to it because it's so delicious. It's so good. And we start off with this quote from Bell Hooks: "To teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential if we were to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin." And we use this quote to kick off chapter 8 because it's so important to us to establish a community of learning where risk-taking and collaboration and support of one another is foundational. So we have a few strategies for that. And of course, sharing the what, why, and how with students. So that's one of the strategies for the very beginning of chapter 8, that we want students to know, where are we going? Why are we going there? How are we going to get there? That's the key pieces that we want to make sure we answer for our students right out of the gate. And then just sort of remembering this idea of, all the way back from chapter 2, of expansive framing. How are we going to link learning to situations outside of school and encourage students to think about different times, different locations, different people, different texts where their understanding might be relevant? So I often say, wow, wouldn't it be cool for students just to analyze, quote unquote, a text of a YouTube video or a TikTok video, or, just that's the way we can really bring in lots of different examples in our own lives. Quick example I want to share, I didn't share in the book club, was last summer my dad was sprinkling ashes from his fire pit, like in the yard. And I was just like, Dad, what are you doing? And he said to me, what concepts, just because he knows me and what I write. And so he's like, what concepts do you think are, present in this situation with me sprinkling ashes in the grass? And I was just like, I have no idea. And so he was just like, come on, think about it. What are some foundational concepts? He's a retired pharmacist. So what are some foundational concepts for, basic chemistry of your yard? So because he said the word chemistry, it triggered my brain to acids and bases. And so I said, okay, is it, we have a problem in Northern Virginia of acid rain, and ashes must be a base. And so you're neutralizing your grass with this, with what you're doing. So that's just a quick example for science, how we can be expansive in how we think about students seeing the concepts show up in everyday lives, and taking the time to model and discuss this with our students, sharing with them where we use the discipline in our everyday lives can really help to build that culture of transfer. So we also have in this chapter are several different tools that you consider for planning. And this one we love, super adaptable, delete the boxes, change the boxes, but it's just a quick 4-week overview of an instructional calendar and how we might sort of plot the lessons out across 4 weeks. Very rough sketch. We, of course, fill it in with all the details, but this is a tool that many teachers find useful to sort of think about, okay, how do I plot out all of my lessons across, the weeks of instruction? Then we just went rapid fire sharing some of our favorite strategies. So I'm not going to go into great detail on this because they're all in the book, but Trevor Love's Affinity Mapping comes from really game storming in the business world. It's a way for students to visually get their ideas out into the world and to move them around, to group them in similar ways. It's such a great strategy that Trevor uses a lot in his classroom. And then concept sort, we all feel concept attainment or concept sort using visuals, objects, or even examples of skills that we want students to master, to get them to notice the critical attributes that are shared across examples. So to me, this is the go-to sort of starting strategy when we're first introducing a concept. And then for me, I love this strategy, what's all true, which also comes from the business world, comes from an innovation specialist named Adam Hansen, who shared with us that he loves to ask clients, what's all true about whatever it is that he's working on innovating. And if you want to listen to that podcast with Adam Hansen, you can hear more about him explaining this strategy. But I've used it with students to say, what's all true about chemical reactions? What's all true about, social studies teachers say, what's all true about identity? What's all true about leadership? What's all true about alliances? And the example we have in the book, as Kayla wrote most of chapter 8, was what's all true about ratios. So mathematics concepts build year after year after year. So hopefully by grade 9, they've got some idea of what ratios are. So you could say, I'm going to put a minute on the clock. I want you to see how many things you can come up with about sort of what's true about ratios. Just brain dump as much as you can in 1 minute about ratios. Make it fun, make it playful. It's such a great strategy. My other favorite strategy is in the transfer phase of Acquire, Connect, Transfer. Actually comes from Tools for Teaching Conceptual Understanding. Also classic Christopher, who's been my co-author from the start, who basically says, you want students to first look at a new situation and then say, where does my previous understanding, how does my previous understanding apply here? So that's the unlock. But then the refine part is, whoa, let me sort of think about how this situation is different and from my prior experiences and how I might refine my understanding based on this new situation. Love, love, love that strategy to create a culture of transfer. So Kayla shared that she absolutely loves it. Comes from the connect phase, hexagonal thinking or hexagonal thinking. We also had Betsy Potash on our podcast called Conceptually Speaking. So if you want to hear more about the creator of this and how it's designed, we absolutely love this strategy. We use it in professional learning all the time, and it's a huge hit. Another thing that Kayla is really passionate about is design thinking, and it's such a good complement to Acquire, Connect, Transfer. So if we want students to transfer their learning to real world scenarios, complementing that with design thinking to sort of plan out students to plan out their solution is such a nice complement. So we included that in chapter 8 for transfer strategies. We had people just reflect what are their favorite strategies. It was really cool to see in chat, to see a lot of back and forth among our different participants. Definitely hexagonal thinking was probably number one. People loved that strategy, and that was really fun. So then we just did our just summary, our key points. Really, for us, assessment reveals a lot about our values and our goals. And so if we don't assess for transfer, what does that communicate to our students? Even if we say we're into transfer, if the assessment remains at the recall level, then students are going to see right through our words. And so we just think that if we assess for transfer, it has the potential to really transform classrooms. And love this line. I think this is also classic Christopher. When students no longer need the teacher to tell them whether or not they've learned something or performed well, we free them and ourselves from the transactional nature of traditional schooling. So gorgeous. We really let them see when they are able to acquire, connect, and transfer something. Chapter 8, we need to explicitly teach students how to be conscious of their thinking and learning, to question their assumptions, and to revisit what they previously understood, to make connections that help them understand how our world is organized and use their understanding to unlock new situations. So that's our key point and hope for chapter 8. So that's all we have for you guys. Please keep in touch. Please check out our companion resource website. Please check out our online courses, and we hope to see you in one of those soon.